Hey everybody, how's everybody doing? This is going to be a live tutorial. Hi Lieutenant Scaro, how are you doing out there in the chat? Alright, so I've been getting a lot of requests to do like the Foliage tool and Sculpting tool. And I apologize, I haven't been doing any video tutorials for a while. I had to move and then I'm battling cancer. I kept that under wraps for a while, but now a lot of my closer friends and some in the Conan modding community know this now. So those of you who've been following me on my YouTube, that's the reason why. So I'm gonna try to go ahead and try to get back into some tutorials. I can't guarantee you I'll have them like every week or something like that, but I'll try to post them when I can. If you have a request, I'll try to do them. However, just up front, I do not do blueprint scripting or coding, so keep that in mind. I do mostly map work, landscaping, dungeon building. I know how the NPC stuff works and things like that. So keep that in mind. I do not do scripting, so please don't request me to code something special or do something to do with the HUD or the user interface. I don't do that type of stuff. I know about it, but I don't do it because I'm not heavily involved in a lot of it. So just keep that in mind. So we'll go ahead and if you do any requests, please keep it more map orientated and map related, art wise, things like that, the tools, how to do the maps, and I'll try to explain some things how certain things work in the dev kit, and it kind of applies to the Unreal Engine as well. So hey Wolfskin, how you doing? So just keep that in mind when you ask for any type of tutorials. If it's more map related, dungeon building related, stuff like that. Custom NPCs, I don't code custom NPCs. I usually use the vanilla, increase the hit points, things like that. And I do the mod tables and stuff like that. So just keep those things in mind when you're asking for any type of help or request any type of video. So I'll try to get these out there as quick as I can. But we'll go ahead and we'll get started here. So the first thing is we're going to cover the Foliage tool. And the Foliage tool is a fun tool. It's also a pain in the ass tool, so keep that in mind. First thing you do is if you go up to Windows and Modes, what you'll do is you'll be presented this panel. I've pulled mine apart because I got multi-monitors. It's easier for me so I can just move out of the side here when I want my viewport. However, I'll keep it here to start with. So this is your foliage buttons. When you click this, you should be presented with a bunch of foliage for a particular height map. Now, when you do your height maps, make sure you have your level open, and I'll bring that out here too. So you pick your level. Now, I'm working on my Conan custom map, so I don't actually have the Conan Exiles map open. However, it works the same way. These are numbered exactly the way a vanilla map would be. However, things would be totally different here as far as the art's concerned in my map. However, just remember that the blue is your level that you have open that all your work is going to go on. So remember, when you start placing things out, you keep things well organized to a point. For instance, I'm going to show you an example of what happens if you don't have stuff placed in the correct map. So right now, I have these rocks that are posted in the wrong level. So for instance, this rock is kind of borderline, so that's okay. You can get away with it, but you don't want to do this persistently throughout the world because eventually you're not going to see these rocks appear in your game because of the way the level streaming works. So I just made the level vanish and make it reappear. So technically these rocks are probably on level 4. We'll find out. Nope, they're actually not. So I got them on the wrong map. So what you want to do is if you find yourself in that situation where you've gotten ahead of yourself, and that's usually what happens to me is I'm doing my art and I forget to make sure I have the correct level open. So just highlight those items. It's always good to check every once in a while and just make sure that the level you want to move to is highlighted in blue. So we're going to go ahead and do that right now. And then I'm going to hide it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go level, move selection to current level. And you just right click. And then I'm just going to go ahead and save that change. So I'm going to unhide the level and make sure they went there. So we'll double check, make sure everything is good to go. And there you have it. And more likely one of these other maps had those rocks on it, which is not a good thing because you don't want to do that consistently. I mean, you can get away with like overlapping occasionally, but what you wanted to do is all those things are part of that particular level streaming, that it streams in with that level accordingly for optimization purposes. Otherwise, you'll just have a heyday of a mess, and you'll start getting reports of lag and other issues, graphic issues and stuff like that. So always have that in the back of your mind. So we'll move that out of the way. And let me make sure I got my chat up here so I can see, because this is a live tutorial. All right, cool. All right, so back to the foliage tool. So you'll be presented with the foliage. Now, if there's particular foliage you want to place on your level, what you're going to do is you're just going to add the foliage type. And you're going to have to search for it. You're going to have to type kind of the name of it. If you don't know the name of it, that's going to be a little bit of a pain in the ass, because some of it's not named accordingly to what it is in game. So you're going to have to kind of search that out. And let me see if I can find an example here. I'm going to search to this so I can pull up the correct folder. So you should be presented, if you search for it, you should be able to see the entire folder. If you want to get an overview of all the foliage, you should be able to see that in a folder called Foliage under the Environment folder, under your Content folder. So if you want to look at the names of different foliage to be able to pull them in and things like that. Now some of them are in other areas too, so just keep that in mind. They're kind of spread throughout a little bit throughout the dev kit, but for a majority of it, it's mostly concentrated in this folder. All right, so we'll move the Content folder out of the way. And another nifty trick too with the foliage tool, when you first want to paint out like this, for instance, notice we got all this foliage selected. We don't want that. So what we can do is I'm going to go hit Control Z to delete all that. And what we want to do is go ahead and take and highlight with your mouse, scroll all the way to the bottom of your foliage list, hit Shift and left mouse click to highlight everything, and then hit the check mark, and then it should uncheck everything. So now you shouldn't be able to paint anything down with our brush, see, because there's nothing selected. So this is where you can select foliage, particularly what you need to paint down. Now I'm just going to go ahead and grab some rocks for an example here. So we're going to grab these up real quick. All right. And you don't have to do anything special for people to loot them, because they're already presets where people can loot them in game. So I'm going to go ahead and paint down. Now if you notice, they're kind of clumped together, and they paint down pretty heavy. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and use the lasso tool. So as long as I have these rocks selected, just these rocks selected, and I use the lasso tool here, I can go back over all this, highlight it, hit my delete key, and it'll remove them. Okay, so now if you say you want particular foliage, say I'm going to mix an aloe plant in with those rocks, okay, and we're going to go back to our paint tool, and I slap it down. But you know, we made a mistake, we don't want the aloe there, so what I can do is then take, highlight my rocks here, uncheck those, use my lasso tool now. Now the only thing that should highlight is anything that has to do with the any bushes or any aloe plants that I had painted down that last time. It'll delete and remove those and keep my other rocks and stuff there. So you can actually remove certain pieces of foliage out of the group that you just painted. I recommend you just try to meticulously keep in mind what you're doing. That's the easier way, so you have to go back and make a lot of corrections. So it's just something to think about. All right, so let's re-click and get our rocks here. So we're going to highlight our rocks and unclick that bad boy here. Let me click here, then uncheck that one single. Oops, and let's get rid of that little brush. That's what I was painting down. I thought it was a rock. Okay, so now with that, I'm just going to go ahead and delete these rocks. So we're going to remove all these rocks, delete them. Okay, now what you can do is you can increase the brush size for your coverage. So I'm just going to go ahead, hit my paint. I always get ahead of myself. Paint that down, and I got my aloe, of course. But notice how it's kind of still grouped and stuff like that. So what you can do is just reduce your brush size, and then just carefully kind of spread things when you splotch it. Now my density right now, and I'll cover that here, is I'm going to go ahead and delete these rocks, and I will show you something. So we're going to get our brush bigger. So you can scoop up a lot of stuff if you make your brush bigger, smaller, etc. Okay, so say you first start out, you got to set your density. Now the density is how much is going to populate in the area when you paint down. So you can see my paint density, I got it set to 0.1. That's what I like to work with. But if you have the thing set at 1, right, 1.0, look at how badly that clumps in. I mean, it literally, you don't want to do that. It's not good, not good. So that doesn't work. So make sure when you set your density, find the density that you need. So we'll go back to density. Like I said, I like to use 0.1 because that gives me more control. See how it's loosened it up and they're spread out further? It's much better on the control as far as painting foliage down. So we'll go ahead and lasso that up again and get rid of that. Now resources, like I said, you don't have to worry about setting up anything special as far as resources. Keep that in mind. It's just automatic. So wherever you decide to paint them, that's where the players will be able to loot them up and take them. So like I said, you might find that some things are not here on your list that you need. So make sure that you look through here through the add foliage type and just look through the folder and try to find what you're looking for. Okay. Let me see. I want to make sure I'm covering everything. Oh yeah, so static meshes, landscape, foliage, painting. So now, say you want a particular, you want to paint stuff down particularly. You hit a single instance, and you highlight the lotus flower, for instance. So now I'm going to get close to the terrain so you can see it. But now my paintbrush has become like a little dot. So now it's just going to paint out whatever I have selected. So I still have the aloe selected here. And what you can do is just single-handedly paint one item down in particular spots. If you need like more, control over where you want to place something, to find it, to mine it, whatever. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that. Hello, Mamisha, how you doing? Okay, so then unselect single, and then we can go back through here with our lasso. We can highlight those and delete those because they're still checked, except for our aloe. See, we didn't delete our aloe. Highlight my aloe, check mark it, delete it. It is gone. So that's how you use the foliage tool. Just keep in mind, don't paint it down heavily. Some examples how I work my foliage here to kind of show you. You don't want it too heavily in certain areas. Don't clump it up too badly if you're trying to get it, a very nice artistic look. Make sure it kind of flows, nicely and neatly. Another thing you can do too is when you're in the select mode on your tool brush here, you can move particular pieces of foliage off of edges and stuff like that. Say you've got a few that are stragglers or just messed up, you can single-handedly collect these and move them to where you need them. Okay, just like that. Just snatch them up. Like say if you got too many trees, like in this particular spot, I have a couple trees that are too close, and you move those. I'm doing pretty good, thank you. So just do that, and that's how you do it. Okay, and you can also, if you want to, you can also scale them from here as well. So you can actually hit your space bar and scale them down a little bit. If something is a little too large, you can rotate them by hitting your space bar, just like you're using a static mesh. But you want to make sure you have the foliage tool on to do this. If you don't have the foliage tool selected, and I'm going to give you an example, and you hit the place tool and you end up doing this, don't hit delete. You will lose all your foliage in your particular map. Trust me, don't do that. You'll hate life. I did that once when I was first starting out doing modding and stuff and learning Unreal Engine. Trust me. So make sure if you come up in a situation like that, instantly when you see yellow on foliage like that, stop what you're doing. Take your time. Don't hit the delete key. Keep your hands away from the delete key, and just hit the foliage tool, and then make sure you have the foliage select so you can go ahead and do that. Trust me. You'll save yourself a lot of heartache and pain and pulling your hair out and yelling and screaming. So, and then you can always contact me, say, hey, I screwed up, and then I'll laugh at you. It's just to make you feel even more miserable, and then I'll sympathize with you and your pain. Trust me, I've done it once, and yeah, I learned my lesson. I'll never ever do that again. And things like this, so your foliage tool is never going to be accurate. So always, keep in mind, look at your foliage. double check it. Sometimes it just paints right over top of itself. It's irritating as crap, trust me. It's just part of the Unreal Engine. There's nothing you can do about it. It's not a Funcom problem. It's Unreal Engine. It does that. There are more settings you can do with Foliage. And sometimes like this, for instance, sometimes you don't, when you click something, you don't get the transform, which is what I'm talking about, which is the arrows. Just try re-clicking it again, because sometimes it might not pop up, the transform arrows. That's just a weird Unreal Engine bug, so keep that in mind. But yeah, like I said, you can actually go through, and technically you can do a lot of changes as far as density and stuff like that in individual pieces of foliage. I recommend not doing that because Funcom's already kind of got it set up. But if you want to, you can. There's nothing saying you can't, but I just recommend not really playing with a whole lot of that stuff, because if you don't know what you're doing, you can mess up a whole lot of stuff. I know what's going on in here because I'm dealing with it in Unreal Engine myself, with my own projects. But if you want to experiment, and you got a project to experiment with in the dev kit, like another mod, then by all means, play with these things, figure them out. That's the best way so you can learn, is to get that, because that's how I've learned. I'm self-taught. I don't do a whole lot. I didn't go to school for this. I didn't go to school for art. But the biggest thing I can tell you to make your levels look nice is try to keep in mind, does the stuff make sense where it's at? You don't plant or paste and paint these type of trees in the greeny grass area. You know what I'm saying? You just don't do that. It just doesn't fit. So keep the artistic eye in mind. Some people don't have that and they don't realize it, or some people are just in a rush and they just want to slap stuff down and get a mod out there and say, hey, look, I got a cool map mod, but you got snow in the desert and it looks great. Yeah, okay. So keep that in mind when you're doing this type of stuff. I think I've covered a majority of the tools. I just want to make sure. BSP and static meshes, and what this means down here in landscape. So the filters, what it is, you can tell the foliage tool not to paint on your static meshes. So for instance, these are static meshes, these rocks here, right? And we can tell the foliage tool don't paint on top of these. I recommend you do, because it makes more sense. And plus, when you do, what's great is that they're actually attached to that static mesh for you. And if we control copy, just duplicate this real quick, the great thing is it'll duplicate the foliage too. So it'll help you speed up some things if you want to kind of, you got a rocky area that's going to kind of look the same almost, or you're trying to tweak and adjust it. It's a nice way to speed the process up, so where you don't have to go through and paint the foliage down on that rock or anything like that again. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. Oops, actually I hit Control Z and we'll put this rock back. Make sure I save everything here. Content, save all. And when you do go to save, you might be presented with a window like this. Just don't worry about it. Just uncheck that, but make sure you keep your levels checked and what you need to save. But don't save the foliage because it's already saved. Or if it says source control, you don't have connection to source control, because that's Funcom's got their own internal source control and stuff like that. So a lot of developers have their Unreal Engine set up to do source control, so they can move and share information. But you're an individual modder or a team, you don't really need that stuff. You're just concentrating on getting your mod done. So real quickly, I'm going to just kind of show you just some examples of how you want to paint down here. And I need to finish kind of this area. And what we'll do is we'll roll into the sculpting tool. So real quickly, I'm just going to grab some foliage here and let this populate. And sometimes you might notice too, the foliage tool will do this weird, like, hey, you're seeing all these rocks. Notice how I got like duplicates of like this one piece. Let the engine catch up. But be careful, just wait for all the thumbnails to populate so you get the right foliage. Because if you're impatient, you start thinking, hey, I'm getting all this stuff. Sometimes the thumbnail hasn't fully rendered in, and then you're clicking, you think you're clicking the lotus plant, but you're also clicking a grub in a palm tree, and then when you go to paint down, you're like, what the hell? It tends to do that, so keep that in mind too when you're doing this type of stuff. So let the tool render in. And if you try to stretch it out too, I've tried to do that. Notice, see how it does this? It doesn't like that. That's what I'm saying. So these are not all the same rock. They're all your different bits and foliage, but for whatever reason, it doesn't. The engine doesn't like to have all that trying to real-time thumbnail like that. So keep that in mind. Okay. So quickly, let's do some painting here. Reduce my brush size. And like I said, just make sure when you do this, artistic wise, you're setting it up to make sense. And that way, it makes your map look better, or the area that you might be touching up, to change it up. Oops, I'm putting down Lotus. Look at that. I'm violating my own rules. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my little select tool and individually pull those few little Lotus out like that. There you go. And then say I got my rocks down, and I want to do a few more. Oops, that didn't make any type of sense. There we go. And let's get rid of those. Shift, unselect those. And then I need to put some sticks down. So let's find some sticks real quick. Actually, some shrubs and some sticks. So we'll get these shrubs. And then we'll select a few sticks and a couple of dead trees here. Yeah, just like that. And then we'll just kind of disperse them. And also keep in mind too when you do this that sometimes if you want to do a heavy sticks, you're not getting enough sticks painting down. Just remember, go ahead and before you try to sit here and go, oh, I want to get sticks, this is what you're going to end up getting. So keep that in mind when you do that as well. So if you need more sticks in an area, then just, deselect everything. And I'm going to go ahead and deselect this one more time. Shift, select all, deselect all, and then just click off to the side to unselect it from when you use the shift. And then we'll go back in here, and I need more sticks, right? So I'm going to go ahead and grab these sticks here real quick, and my brush size is good. And you might have to sit here and paint a few times, but what you can do is if that's not working for you, just go to the density tool on your paint, right? Just increase it, and then you'll get more to paint out. So that way you have more control over that type of stuff. So you're not pulling your hair out going, what the heck? Why ain't this giving me my sticks I want? And just like that, we'll just put down some sticks. And a few more sticks along here, some logs. But, I don't want to have a bunch of duplicate logs, right? So just go back through, take your select tool, like I said, your single select, and just delete those out, repeats and stuff like that. Or if you need to, rotate it, sink it down, have part of it sticking up, whatever you decide to do. You just don't want to have a whole lot of repeat type stuff because that's the foliage tool does that. Not in a particular, because the human eye, you can see it all the same in one area. But if you see it once here, but then as you're running along and you're so immersed, you don't even realize that same log is popping up. You really don't, unless you're absolutely looking for it. But when you do this, you start seeing it as the artist. So, all right. So I think we covered everything. Let me make sure. Make sure you always save consistently. The dev kit will crash on you. Let's see here. It's doing it again, so we'll just do that. And we'll select these and make sure that's saving that. Oops, I do not need to save foliage. Okay. So yeah, we covered landscape, static meshes, paint on the static meshes, translucent. You really don't have to deal with translucent and foliage. Painting foliage on foliage is not a good idea. That'd be a mess. Paint bucket. I never play with paint bucket. I don't really think you need to, but hey, if you're willing to experiment, then be my guest. Okay, so I think we covered the foliage tool. Now let's cover the sculpt tool. And let's see here, sculpting. Okay, so the same way to get to the foliage tool, you would use the same procedure. The mountain is your sculpting. Here's your different brushes. So you got your sculpt, smooth, flatten, ramp, erosion, hydro erosion. Stay away from these hydro erosion noise and re-apologize. Apologize. I don't know what that is. You know, they gotta make funny names for texturing. But stay away from those. I don't recommend them because they do more harm than good, and they cause you nightmares to sit there and mess with them. You know, use the basics here. These are pretty easy, self-explanatory, much easier to maneuver. These tend to cause a lot more issues. Plus, you got to think too. You want your NPC player collision cages to go over the terrain and not be obstructed. And when you get into those hydro sculpting, erosion, stuff like that, they tend to create some jagged areas which would cause a lot of jittery NPCs, and they don't flow over the map terrain very well. So always keep that in mind. Okay, so in the visibility, now I have had people ask me, how do you cut holes in the terrain? You hit the visibility tool, and we're just going to quickly show you this. So let me find a spot here that would make sense. Yeah, we'll do it right here because we're kind of on a slope here. So you just take it, you can resize it. The bigger the hole, or the bigger the brush, the bigger the hole you're going to get. So we just hit that. We'll let the shaders run. And what this should do is it should cut a hole. And that's how you cut a hole. Now when you cut a hole, remember not to have any foliage painted out because the foliage is still on the map. The map is still here, but now what we've done, we've cut a hole to where the collision's gone, but the foliage is going to stay there. So make sure, we'll hit Control Z real quick, and just make sure you remove that foliage, but I'm going to just go down here a little bit lower. We're going to recut. Now say I don't want that, you just hold down Shift with your visibility tool and you can fill it back in to get control over the hole. Okay, so that's how you do that. So Shift to repaint back over the hole. So we'll cut it and then Shift, repaint. Cut hole. See, we can cut the hole, then Shift, repaint. Now there's a term called tessellation. So that awesome effect where you're walking through the sand, it's making these sand trails. That's tessellation. Now tessellation is assigned to the material. You can't turn it off or on unless you want to go. I mean, if you want to go through and look for it, be my guest. But it's one of the material settings. And what happens when you use the hole cutting tool, and if people have tessellation turned on their video card, or not on their tessellation turned on, but I think it's high effects or extreme effects, turn the effects down to high. That should shut off the tessellation, so they're going to lose that cool, fancy sand walking through the sand feature. But the problem with tessellation is on the material, if you cut a hole on this type of sand with the tessellation involved, the sand is going to stretch across the hole and it's going to look weird. So in some of my mods, people noticed that, and I said just turn off the effects to high from extreme or ultra, and that'll correct that. You just won't get the nice sand features. That's the problem with that type of terrain. So keep that in mind when you're cutting holes in the sand or anything that has tessellation involved. That will be a problem with whole terrain. Okay, so cutting holes in the terrain. So that's how you cut a hole in the terrain. All right. I get asked that a lot because people are confused by it. All right, so we're going to go up here and we're going to use the Sculpt tool. And like the Foliage tool, we have a paintbrush size we can use. Okay, our brush sizes. So I'm just going to kind of sculpt up. And I recommend when you do this just to kind of tap it to get your sense of how powerful this is. You can kind of set the tool strength here. I leave it to the default, which is 0.3. Just, get used to what it is. It's mostly just learning to tap the mouse button, get your brush sizes right, to sculpt and stuff like that. So now I went to the flatten tool up here and I'm just kind of flattening, and that's exactly what it does. It will flatten terrain, but the thing is you want to make sure you're at the flattest point on the terrain if you want to get that flattening effect. Because if you don't, and say I start up flattening up on top here, then it stretches it flat across that. So find the lowest point in the terrain where you want to flatten it, and you can flatten it out. I use the flattening tool and I kind of tap it, and this is how I can cut down some hills and kind of form ramps like this instead of using the ramp tool. The ramp tool, it's quite powerful, and what you can do is you click a point and click a point, and then you hit add ramp, and it'll do that to your terrain for you. It'll create a ramp. However, it's kind of boxy looking. And just go back up here, hit sculpt, and then we can mess with it. I usually don't use it a lot for when I'm doing my terrain because I like to do hand sculpting personally. That's my way I do things. You don't necessarily have to do it that way, but I found being the artistic, the way I am on my artisticness, my artisticness, my artsiness. I find it much more enjoyable to hand sculpt certain things like that. But if you're trying to speed through certain points, and by all means, do it your way. However, snow doesn't recommend that. Just So by doing all this, what we just did, this mess here, I'm just going to use the smooth tool, and that's exactly what it does. Is it smooths. Now, say I want to lower a point in here. What you do is you hit your sculpt tool again. You find the point, reduce your brush size, hold down shift, and what will happen is instead of flying up, you hold down shift and click the same button. Now we're going to sync the terrain. So this is how you can kind of do some lakes or do your kind of divots in the terrain. If you need some divots or some low points, you can kind of use that with your sculpt tool and kind of cut down the hill. And then we just go back to smooth, and we're just going to smooth it out. And that's great. And the materials are all set up, which is nice. So the materials are set up on the atlasing thing, where that's why you got so many materials in a list when you go to paint. It's set up on an atlasing system because technically I believe Unreal is only defaulted to like 9 materials that you can paint on a map. So with atlasing, that actually gives you more. So it's a cool thing, but it requires a lot of work and a lot of expertise in setting up materials. So we won't go into that because I don't like materials. Not one of my favorites to do. All right, so like I said, it's automatically set up. So what's great about this is, the auto landscaping feature will color in on the different high points and low points of the terrain to give you those effects. So right now I'm just painting down the desert dry in here just to show you how it'll do that. And then like the desert rock, if we paint desert rock, the low points or the edges will turn the different colors, and then the degrees of sloping, how it paints in to give you those effects. So auto landscaping is a very nice system, because if you're just regular materials, then you got to actually paint these different elevations in yourself. So it's a nice feature to have that done for you automatically. So excellent stuff. But that's basically it for sculpting. And then when you get to like the seams on a map, let me show you that real quick so I don't forget to cover that. So we'll go to a map, for instance. Let me find a seam. Okay, so we have the seam here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and we're going to sculpt right here. Get my sculpting app. And I'm going to sculpt that like that with the map hidden. Then unhide it. Notice how it gapped the map. So when you get close to your seams, make sure you watch those. So always have your maps open that you're getting close to the seam so you can get the seams right. If you have a situation like this, it's really easy. You just take your tool. You can either use the smooth and just smooth it down, and it'll pull the edges together. It kind of stitches them together, and no problem. So very, very easy stuff to do. Not a problem. So hopefully this tutorial helped out a lot of you out there who are asking about foliage and sculpting and how to do this stuff. Yeah, very, very simple, not too hard. But for those of you who are starting out, it can be overwhelming. But once you've gotten it and you start playing with it a lot more, as long as you play with the dev kit or Unreal Engine, you'll start picking it up a lot faster. I know I make it look easy. A lot of people tell me I make it look easy, but really it just takes time. It takes time, hand-eye coordination to get down these things, and then learning, you know, on your own how well you're painting things down. Is it grouped? Is it too tight? Is it too messy? Those are things you're going to have to kind of learn on your own as you go. But if you look at if you use the Conan Exile's vanilla map, then you open it up and you look at it, you can kind of learn based off of what their artist did to help kind of teach your mind. If you're not very artistic, it'll help you get your mind wrapped around what you need to do artistic wise. Um, just remember, it takes time. It's not something that some people are not born with the artistic eye, so it'll take you a little bit. But if you're interested in the art side, that's what I recommend is look at this type of stuff, study it to figure out how it's being done and how it's being applied, and kind of work with it and go from there. So, all right, I think that covers this tutorial, and I don't want to be too long. Let me take a look at my time. Okay, this is 40 minutes, so I want to kill people for an hour with the sculpting and foliage tool. But if you have any questions on it, if there's something I missed or didn't cover, let me know. And I'll try to cover those later on in another video and just kind of add it in, sneak it in or something like that. So, all right. And those of you in live chat, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my custom map. So don't worry, I'm not going anywhere, but I need to end this video technically for YouTube. So thank you for all my YouTube supporters, Patreons. You can follow me in Discord. You can follow me in ArtStation. Let me see here. I think I have an image I can share real quick with my... If not, I'll share it in the links below on the YouTube videos where you can find me in my Discord, ArtStation, stuff like that. And you can look at my my stuff there. I'm doing a custom map for Conan, and you can check in on that on my Discord or my ArtStation, or follow me on my Patreon page where we've got some Conan community fans following me and supporting me with single-handedly building this custom map. So that's what you're looking at right now is a custom map at the moment that I'm building. So single-handedly right now. But anyway, all right. I'm going to go ahead and end this tutorial, but thank you once again, all YouTube supporters and stuff out there. I appreciate it. And we will get another video hopefully out there, another tutorial covering probably some more height map type stuff. But just let me know in the comments, and I'll see what I can do. I'll try to cook up another tutorial for you guys. All right. So thank you again, and we'll catch you next time. Bye, everybody.